Now that you mentioned poetry, right? Let's move on from these more serious topics about learning and things, and now let's talk about not a lot of people might know this about you, but you recently won the IE Foundation Prize for poetry, and that was fantastic. That was insane. But I couldn't read your poetry because it was in Spanish, but I'm sure it was amazing. And I don't think anyone knew that you had this soft romantic side to you. Maybe. So do you wanna tell us about poetry and what inspires that outlet?
Well, first of all, thanks. Please don't butcher it by using Google Translate.
First thing I'm gonna do after this.
Oh, I figured. Yeah, it's true. I didn't share this. I mean, obviously, people that know me from a long time ago, they know about this side of me in terms of a reader and a writer. I haven't really written that much over the last years, but it was something that I used to do quite a lot, I would say, throughout my 20s. I've still do, and I should do more. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the question of inspiration, though, it's a very tricky one. Because it's something I have given thought to a lot. And I was thinking, it's obviously one of those things that you cannot just define in like 2 sentences, right? Yeah. And it makes sense that it is that way, right? It is fuzzy. You need to approach it via many different angles, superimpose layers of meaning, and then it is nice that it is that way because it applies to the products that are the outcome of inspiration. So to try to showcase what I think of inspiration, I have actually prepared a small journey, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep in control of it. All right, so let's see if we see it through.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, there is an author that I really like. I used to read him a lot. I mean, I didn't stop because of lack of interest that he stopped producing. His name is Milan Kundera. Do you know him?
No.
It's a Czech French writer.
Okay. What does he write in? What language?
Most of his works were in Czech.
Okay.
And at some point, because he migrated to France, he produced some works in French.
Okay. And do you know these languages, or do you read the transcribed version?
I'm afraid I read the translations.
Do you feel they transcribe well or translate well?
I would like to think so, because I know he's very keen on language.
Okay.
And I think he supervises some of the translations, particularly the one to Spanish. So I'm quite confident it makes it justice. So, for example, this author, one of his French novels is called Ignorance. He produced 3, right? Ignorance, Slowness, and Identity.
Okay.
And Ignorance has, he does it actually in many of his works. He interrupts the narrative at some point to introduce a digression into an important topic. And sometimes this digression has to do with a word that is a leitmotif for the entire plot. Okay. And it can be actually an etymological journey, right? And he dives into the root of a word. And I have to say, I've always enjoyed these etymology journeys enormously. So let's take, for example, ignorance, right? I have it right here. I know that reading is not particularly podcast amicably, but just bear with me. It will be a very short snippet.
No, please go for it. All yours.
All right. So here it is, ignorance. In chapter 2, he introduces a digression to talk about return. The idea of return is very compelling to all of us. And there may be a reason for that. So here it goes. The Greek word for return is nostos. Algos means suffering. So nostalgia is the suffering caused by an unappeased yearning to return. To express that fundamental notion, most Europeans can utilize a word derived from the Greek, that is nostalgia, as well as other words with roots in their national languages. Añoranza in Spanish, saudade in Portuguese. In each language, these words have a different semantic nuance. Often they mean only the sadness caused by the impossibility of returning to one's country, a longing for country, for home. What in English is called homesickness, or in German, Heimweh. But this reduces that great notion to just its spatial element. I'm going to fast forward here to different snippet. The Germans rarely use the Greek-derived term nostalgie and tend to say Sehnsucht in speaking of the desire for an absent thing. But Sehnsucht can refer both to the something that has existed and to something that has never existed, and therefore it does not necessarily imply the nostos idea. The dawn of ancient Greek culture brought the birth of the Odyssey, the founding epic of nostalgia. Let us emphasize, Odysseus, the greatest adventurer of all time, is also the greatest nostalgic. Right. You see, this is quite interesting, right?
Very interesting.
And it is actually in the middle of a narrative regarding some characters that are, bumping into each other after many years. Anyway.
But I really liked what that snippet said about when you use that word in the sense that we know of it in English, like homesickness. You reduce it to what it is, like your association with a place, while you fail to capture perhaps the essence or the soul of that emotion itself.
Exactly. It makes you feel that there are many, many layers.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible.
Around a concept, right? So if you allow me just a bit more.
Please, go ahead, please.
I think my favorite works of him are the essays, right? There's another book of essays called Encounter. And there is one essay in that book called The Untouchable Solitude of a Foreigner. And it is about Oscar Miłosz, a writer. And here this is a very, very short snippet. He talks about a poem of this author that really impressed him in his youth. So here it is. But why this poem in particular? The essential reason, I think, lay in the discovery of something I had never encountered anywhere else. I discovered the archetype of a form of nostalgia that is expressed grammatically, not by the past, but by the future, the grammatical future of nostalgia. The grammatical form that projects a lamented past into a distant future, that transforms the melancholy evocation of a thing that no longer exists into the heartbreaking sorrow of a promise that can never be realized. So, this is, the plot thickens, right? He is adding more and more layers to the notion of nostalgia,
right?
Intertwined with return. And so this, you can tell something is going on here, right? You feel compelled, just by the way he describes it. And also return is something that it's very easy that it may mean something for you more than the mere definition of return, right? Particularly if you're someone who at some point left your country, as is my case, is now yours. So now I'm going to stop with Kundera and share something more personal, okay?
Please.
Non-official, non-published, non-academic. So there's a good friend of mine who has a book in the making. Hopefully it will be published at some point soon. And it contains an aphorism that has been very meaningful to us over the years because it's unattributed as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he heard it somewhere or read it in a place he can't remember. And it is something that has become more and more meaningful for us over time. And it goes like this. Past the age of 40, we all start looking like devastated cities. Right. I mean, I know for the young listeners out there, this may mean nothing. Okay. But it is something that actually became meaningful to me because you see, so here's the thing. When you leave your hometown for an exchange program, right? Or even for a formal program like IE was the case for a sabbatical for whatever the reason, you can still go to some place and return to your hometown and feel that nothing much has changed.
Mm-hmm.
You return to, you identify the mechanisms of the city, you feel there is no detachment. You haven't lost any reference, right? But if you're abroad for long enough, particularly if you leave with more or less the intention of staying abroad, at some point it hits you that the landscape that you were used to starts losing references. It
Mm-hmm.
starts deteriorating a little, and it can be something silly. I mean, I myself didn't give much thought to this, but you know, the city you come from has its like objective geography,
Right.
but it also has a map, a personal map that you have superimposed on it. And then there are certain places which may be insignificant for someone else that are very meaningful to you.
Absolutely.
Right?
It could be a small bakery at the corner of your street.
Exactly.
That's
It
shut
can
down,
be,
right? And then,
yeah, it can be a bench in a certain park, right?
right.
Where certain words were exchanged, a secret was shared or heard, or you know, a kiss was given or received. You know, it's very meaningful.
Right.
It can be a cafe, it can be a bookstore, and suddenly, you know, one day the bookstore is now a state agency. You know, the park doesn't exist anymore. The cafe, I don't know, the building was demolished, whatever. These things start accumulating. And then one day, these things come together to a sufficient extent for you to feel that your map is getting emptier.
Right.
And that part of the city that you have in mind, there are certain milestones in the map that now only live in your memory. You've lost the physical reference, right?
Would this be, can we liken this to the nostalgia that you talked about previously, of you projecting a nostalgia into the future?
I'm getting there. I'm trying to use, this is why I'm trying to make a journey out of this.
Oh yeah, so my bad.
No, but good. It means you realize that you're on board. So you, on the one hand, you feel, when I reflected on this aphorism, I started thinking, wow, you don't get to devastation straight away. You know, devastation starts occurring because the city that you remember starts losing references. Right. Your landscape loses, the orography is flattening, right? And then you start thinking, you know, the idea of return may be there, but it's not a real return necessarily. It's like you would like to return to the city that you have in your memory, but doesn't exist anymore. So that's why the idea of return is compelling. It is something that is, it resonates with you. Yeah. Right. And then what do you do? That devastation is irreversible if you stay abroad. So you need, what can you do to at least ameliorate that effect, right? You need to create references. You need to try to enrich your landscape as best you can. So let me see if I'm going to throw at you the very last quote of Kundera, right? And with this, let's see if we can see if the journey actually was useful or not. This one is his most famous novel. You may have heard the title. It's The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
Of course.
Yeah, all right. Here we go. So this is another digression towards the end. It's chapter 23. And it says, we will need someone to look at us. We can be divided into 4 categories according to the kind of look we wish to live under. The first category longs for the look of an infinite number of anonymous eyes. In other words, for the look of the public. Sorry, I'm just jumping forward. The second category is made up of people who have a vital need to be looked at by many known eyes. They are the tireless hosts of cocktail parties and diners. They are happier than the people in the first category who, when they lose their public, have the feeling that the lights have gone out in the room of their lives. Jumping forward again. Then there is the third category, the category of people who need to be constantly before the eyes of the person they love. Their situation is as dangerous as the situation of people in the first category. One day, the eyes of their beloved will close and the room will go dark.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, there is the fourth category, the rarest, the category of people who live in the imaginary eyes of those who are not present. They are the dreamers. So, for me, the dreamers are the people that are least affected by the devastation, because they don't ever lose references.
Right.
And you see, when this journey that I tried to make here was articulated around a notion and a word, like return, or nostalgia, that they could be combined in here.
Right.
And so let me see if I can wrap this up. It's complex. So why do you feel sometimes inspired by something? I'm referring to inspiration, not just as a state where you can deliver something, but just as a state where you are sensitive to receiving something. Why does something resonate with you? And I think that is because when inspiration hits you via some words in a verse or some drawn lines on a canvas or whatever, it's because you feel that there is a deeper structure than what you're just seeing. There is like there's an enormous puzzle out there, like universal, but in a very local area you sense that you know how one piece fits. So you feel there is a structure locally, and that's why it feels so compelling. And that's why structural engineers make great poets. Okay, that last part was made up, but the journey somehow makes sense. It's for me, it's I have something similar to this whenever I read something that resonates. I feel that I'm looking at several layers of meaning that are being there behind that specific line or behind that specific curve or color or whatever.
That was incredible, man. That journey was so well put together. Really, no, I'm not even kidding. It's a lot of these notions that at least I know I've had. I've always felt. I think you found a brilliant way, beautiful way of expressing that. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with the poet Alejandro, much more perhaps than the data scientists that I've known.